Cardi B fired off a defense for Stefon Diggs before the paperwork started swinging back, and that timing is exactly why the story just changed shape. Social media noise can blur almost anything for a day or two. Court filings do the opposite. Court filings sharpen outlines. Court filings force names, dates, records, assistants, phone activity, and public statements into one place where excuses start colliding with sequence. Right now, sequence is becoming the real star of this story, and sequence is not flattering Stefon Diggs. The newest turn comes from reporting that Christopher Blake Griffith wants to widen the case with fresh allegations and fresh evidence pulled from discovery. According to reporting carried by AOL through TMZ, Christopher Blake Griffith says assistant communications show coordination around travel logistics tied to one of the alleged assailants, and Christopher Blake Griffith says phone logs place a call between Stefon Diggs and that same alleged assailant during the attack window. Christopher Blake Griffith also wants to add a defamation claim tied to a social post that framed Christopher Blake Griffith as a liar who got caught stealing. Nothing in that filing is a verdict. Everything in that filing matters because every new record changes leverage. Source: another pressure point arrived earlier when TMZ reported that a judge ordered Stefon Diggs to provide a fuller explanation of how Stefon Diggs knew Christopher Blake Griffith. A vague label like acquaintance did not satisfy the court. That detail sounds small until the larger picture comes into focus. Distance has always been useful in celebrity scandals. Distance lets supporters imagine a random opportunist, a stranger with a motive, a clout-chasing villain with no real foothold in the story. A judge pushing for a truthful, complete, non-evasive answer weakens that distance defense immediately. Source: then another layer landed in July. Yahoo reported that Christopher Blake Griffith said more than 100 pages of communications had already been turned over, including iMessage exchanges and Instagram messages. 100 pages is not proof by magic. 100 pages is also not internet smoke. 100 pages means context battles, timeline battles, deletion battles, motive battles, and credibility battles are moving out of the comment section and into a record. That shift matters because messy scandals survive on fog. Documents eat fog alive. Source: that is why the real angle in this story is not shock. The real angle is convergence. Convergence is the moment separate problems stop looking separate. A relationship question here. A discovery fight there. A social post that seemed aggressive in the moment, but suddenly looks risky under later scrutiny. Assistant communications that may or may not line up with travel. Phone activity that may or may not match surveillance timing. An original allegation that no longer stands alone because later developments keep bending toward the same center. Convergence is brutal because convergence changes how audiences feel before any final ruling arrives. Start with a contradiction that refuses to die. The public language around Stefon Diggs has leaned hard on theft. Theft is useful language because theft gives defenders a simple moral shortcut. Theft can turn sympathy upside down in a single sentence. Theft can make outrage feel justified. Theft can make retaliation sound emotionally understandable, even when retaliation never looks clean on paper. Yet theft in a real legal setting is not a magic spell. Theft usually creates an obvious question. Where's a direct theft pathway through authorities, reports, charges, and documented actions? That question does not prove anything by itself. That question keeps hanging over the story because the louder the theft framing becomes, the stranger surrounding litigation choices begin to look. Cardi B fits into the story because Cardi B adds voltage, not because Cardi B decides facts. Cardi B publicly defending Stefon Diggs helped shape the early emotional climate. Cardi B made the situation feel tribal. Pick a side. Laugh at the other side. Treat the story like another celebrity pile-on. Yet filings do not care about tribal energy. Filings turn every loud moment into future context. Once records start stacking, public defenses can age badly at light speed. A statement that looked loyal on day 1 can look premature on day 30. A joke that looked sharp in a fan war can look reckless when attached to later exhibits. Silence later on does not prove guilt, innocence, strategy, or panic. Silence later on still lands differently once the paperwork gets heavier. That shift from fan energy to evidence energy is where many celebrity stories flip. Early phase stories reward the boldest voice. Middle phase stories reward the cleanest record. Right now, this case is moving deeper into the middle phase. Middle phase means everyone around the story starts calculating risk in public. Friends calculate risk. Brands calculate risk. Content creators calculate risk. Gossip pages calculate risk. Sports commentary pages calculate risk. Nobody wants to be the last person screaming certainty while fresh documents keep surfacing. Nobody wants a passionate clip from the first week, replayed next to a court filing from the 5th month. Stefon Diggs now faces a strategic problem bigger than one allegation. The strategic problem is narrative discipline. A disciplined defense would aim for clean continuity from the start. Clear relationship framing, consistent explanations, no unnecessary public statements, and no extra language that can be folded into amended claims. Instead, the public picture now feels crowded. Crowded stories are dangerous because crowded stories produce cross-checks. A statement in one place starts rubbing against a filing in another place. A vague answer in one phase starts looking weaker after a judge demands more detail. A post written for supporters can become useful material for opponents. One crowded story can suddenly become 5 smaller stories, and 5 smaller stories create 5 chances for a contradiction. Christopher Blake Griffith, meanwhile, gained something valuable even before any merits ruling: procedural legitimacy. A person treated like gossip can become harder to dismiss when a judge orders fuller answers, when discovery disputes produce more records, and when amended complaints add specific claims tied to concrete items. Procedural legitimacy is not courtroom victory. Procedural legitimacy still changes the public atmosphere. Procedural legitimacy tells spectators that the case has moved beyond random accusation territory and entered a zone where process itself is generating pressure. This is where the hidden villain of the story emerges. And the hidden villain is not a person. The hidden villain is accumulation. Accumulation rarely looks cinematic on the first pass. Accumulation looks annoying. Another filing, another motion, another narrow correction, another record request, another exhibit, another phrase preserved in a screenshot, another explanation that now needs more explanation. Then one day accumulation stops looking annoying and starts looking fatal. Many public blowups do not explode because of a single bombshell. Many public blowups collapse because little pieces begin agreeing with one another too often. That possibility is exactly why the reported assistant records matter so much. Assistants occupy the invisible machinery of celebrity life. Assistants book travel, route messages, juggle logistics, smooth rough edges, and create trails without meaning to create narrative trails. If assistant communications support Christopher Blake Griffith's sequence, risk multiplies for Stefon Diggs. If assistant communications fail to support Christopher Blake Griffith's sequence, risk multiplies for Christopher Blake Griffith. Either way, assistant material is dangerous because assistant material belongs to the category of routine conduct, and routine conduct can look persuasive inside a disputed timeline. Source: phone timing matters for the same reason. Phone timing feels ordinary until phone timing overlaps with an alleged event window. Then ordinary data starts acting like a witness. A call log does not narrate motive. A call log does not interpret content. A call log still narrows the room. Once a timeline narrows, every side loses rhetorical space. Court fights often turn on space. More space means more storytelling. Less space means more explaining. Nobody in a messy celebrity case wants less space. That is also why the judge's earlier order matters beyond the literal discovery dispute. The order signaled impatience with vagueness. Vague storytelling works beautifully in public. Vague storytelling fails when a court wants specificity. Courts do not reward aura. Courts do not reward swagger. Courts do not reward popularity. Courts reward clearer answers than the internet usually demands. A judge asking how Stefon Diggs and Christopher Blake Griffith knew each other is not a side quest. That question goes directly to plausibility, access, prior context, and how a jury might evaluate every later interaction. Source: the most viral way to understand this whole mess is through one frame. Every old statement is getting drafted into a new war. That social post about lying and stealing might have felt like a counterpunch when posted. Now that same post is part of a potential defamation expansion. Early bravado has become later exposure. A lot of celebrity scandals follow that rhythm. Public figures swing first in public because public swinging feels powerful. Discovery arrives later and asks whether public swinging created avoidable damage. Some post in a day and lose the season. This post may end up in that category. Another overlooked detail sits inside the phrase 100 pages. 100 pages suggests persistence. 100 pages suggests a relationship with enough texture to fight over what was said, what was missing, what was blocked, what was preserved, and what context actually means. 100 pages does not settle truth. 100 pages makes simple fairy tales harder to sell. A fairy tale needs clean roles. Hero, villain, liar, victim. 100 pages almost always make at least one role look less stable. Source: Cardi B's role in the public theater matters for one more reason. Cardi B creates a bridge between legal controversy and pop culture appetite. Sports stories can stay confined. Lawsuit stories can stay niche. Add Cardi B, and the audience multiplies. Add public defense, and curiosity sharpens. Add later silence, and the internet starts writing motives in real time. That cycle is brutal for everybody involved because the internet treats every pause like evidence and every outburst like confession. Neither assumption is reliable. Both assumptions drive views. That tension is exactly why this case feels primed for sustained viral attention rather than one quick scandal burst. Now comes a question that can reframe the whole narrative. What if the case never turns on one dramatic reveal at all? What if a decisive factor is simply which side can survive sequence? Sequence has no emotions. Sequence only asks what appeared first, what appeared next, what changed, what stayed vague, and what outside records do to both versions. Sequence can make a loud denial look sturdy. Sequence can also make a loud denial look improvised. Sequence can make a sprawling allegation collapse. Sequence can also make a sprawling allegation feel uncomfortably coherent. Sequence is undefeated because sequence strips glamour off every story. That is where the unique angle lives, and that angle is what many competitors miss. Most videos chase the loudest allegation. Most videos chase the wildest insult. Most videos chase the celebrity names like pinballs. The stronger angle is the paperwork angle. The stronger angle says the real danger is not only what happened in private. The real danger is what the filings are doing in public. Filings are changing posture. Filings are changing optics. Filings are changing who looks calm, who looks cornered, who looks impulsive, and who suddenly needs the audience to stop talking until the next deadline passes. If another cluster of records surfaces, and those records keep matching Christopher Blake Griffith's claimed timeline, the conversation around Stefon Diggs will darken fast. A case can survive noise. A case struggles to survive alignment. Alignment is when multiple disputed pieces stop fighting each other and start pointing in one direction. Alignment does not guarantee a win. Alignment destroys casual dismissal. Casual dismissal is valuable. Casual dismissal keeps sponsors relaxed, keeps supporters loud, keeps content creators split, and keeps everybody pretending the scandal is probably just another clout circus. Alignment kills that comfort. The opposite path still exists. Stefon Diggs can still benefit if fuller answers arrive, if context reshapes the records, if disputed timing fails under scrutiny, or if Christopher Blake Griffith's expanded claims overreach beyond what the documents can actually support. That possibility remains real. That possibility simply carries less emotional ease than early supporters probably expected. Nobody loves a phrase, wait for discovery, until discovery starts cutting against instinct. That is the moment instinct stops feeling like insight and starts feeling like liability. Notice how every actor around the story now faces a different cost. Stefon Diggs faces the cost of convergence. Christopher Blake Griffith faces the cost of proof. Cardi B faces the cost of public association. Supporters face the cost of old certainty. View-chasing creators face the cost of weak analysis. Even silent observers face a cost because silence becomes harder once a story starts rewarding close reading more than hot takes. Viral stories are usually driven by emotion. Enduring stories are driven by structure. This story is mutating from emotion into structure. Structure is exactly why the story feels dangerous. Structure means the case has rooms. One room contains the original allegation. Another room contains the alleged assault aftermath. Another room contains discovery fights. Another room contains relationship ambiguity. Another room contains social posting. Another room contains celebrity defense. A weak case struggles to keep opening new rooms. A strong case can open rooms because different forms of pressure keep feeding one another. Once spectators realize rooms are connecting, panic starts spreading among everyone who got comfortable in the hallway. That is the image worth holding on to, a hallway getting narrower. At first, a scandal like this looks huge, chaotic, impossible to pin down. Plenty of room for jokes. Plenty of room for denial. Plenty of room for fandom theater. Then documents arrive, and the hallway narrows. The hallway narrows again when a judge demands detail. The hallway narrows again when communications show up. The hallway narrows again when a social post becomes part of a legal argument. Narrow hallways are where swagger starts bumping into walls. Stefon Diggs does not need a fan war right now. Stefon Diggs needs precision. Christopher Blake Griffith does not need theatrics right now. Christopher Blake Griffith needs documents that keep surviving contact with scrutiny. Cardi B does not need one more loud defense right now. Cardi B needs distance from a story that may keep generating filings. The audience does not need one more fake certainty sermon right now. The audience needs to understand that discovery is where fantasy either dies or hardens into something far more serious than gossip. One more reason this update lands so hard is that celebrity audiences can smell sequence even without understanding legal procedure. Spectators may never read emotion. Spectators still understand rhythm. A story that keeps producing new paperwork feels alive. A defense that keeps adjusting tone feels stressed. A circle that gets quieter as documents get louder feels worried. Viral intuition is not evidence, but viral intuition often predicts where public sentiment is headed. Public sentiment is heading toward caution around Stefon Diggs, not confidence. That is the real headline beneath the headline. Christopher Blake Griffith may or may not win in court. Stefon Diggs may or may not beat back the claims. Cardi B may or may not ever speak on the matter again. None of those later answers erase the shift happening right now. The shift is from spectacle to scrutiny. Spectacle can be laughed off. Scrutiny cannot. Scrutiny creates memory. Scrutiny creates archives. Scrutiny creates a trail that future interviews, brand conversations, and media coverage cannot easily outrun. So the next major update is not just another episode in a celebrity mess marathon. The next major update is a stress test for the whole architecture of each public narrative. If Stefon Diggs provides a fuller, cleaner, stronger explanation that harmonizes relationship history, discovery posture, and public rhetoric, pressure can loosen. If Christopher Blake Griffith keeps producing records that reinforce sequence, pressure can multiply quickly. No matter which direction comes next, one fact is already locked. This story is no longer running on gossip fuel alone. This story is running on connective tissue. Connective tissue is terrifying for public figures because connective tissue changes the public question from did something wild happen to does the whole pattern fit together. That second question is harder, outrun. That second question follows every new filing. That second question follows every deleted post, every silence, every hedged answer, every old clip dragged back into daylight. Once a scandal becomes a pattern hunt, everyone involved starts living inside a microscope. That microscope is why this moment matters more than any screaming live stream, any mocking meme, or any fan page victory lap. The biggest threat to Stefon Diggs may not be one devastating reveal. The biggest threat to Stefon Diggs may be a chain. Chains matter because chains can be mapped. Chains can be tested. Chains can be broken. Chains can also hold. The filings now suggest a possible chain. That possibility alone is enough to change the temperature of the entire story. Final takeaway. Celebrity volume can win a weekend, but documented sequence can win the long war. Cardi B brought attention. Christopher Blake Griffith brought persistence. Stefon Diggs brought star power and denial. The court process is now bringing gravity. Gravity is a force that changes everything in slow motion until collapse suddenly looks obvious in hindsight. Right now, gravity is a reason this case feels heavier than a trending topic and more dangerous than a fan argument ever could. Watch the next filing, the next answer, the next amendment, and the next silence. Every one of those moments now carries more weight than a dozen opinion posts. Sequence is squeezing the available room, and shrinking room is bad news for any public narrative built on vibes instead of verification. Pressure rarely arrives with fireworks. Pressure often arrives with timestamps, wording changes, and routine records that suddenly stop looking routine. That is why the smartest viewers are no longer asking only who shouted first. The sharper question is which record survives longest. A messy headline can fade. A documented pattern can stain careers, partnerships, endorsements, and public trust for years. Public confidence around Stefon Diggs now depends less on charisma and more on whether future filings flatten or reinforce Christopher Blake Griffith sequence. Every added exhibit turns the story away from speculation and closer to a measurable architecture of claims, responses, and consequences. Nobody inside the story should want extra noise. Noise gives emotion. Records give shape. Shape lasts longer than noise. If alignment keeps building, old defenses will look less like loyalty and more like footage from a moment when the paperwork had not spoken loudly enough yet. If alignment breaks, Christopher Blake Griffith will face the blowback that always comes when a record-heavy accusation outruns supportable proof. Watch the next filing, the next answer, the next amendment, and the next silence. Every one of those moments now carries more weight than a dozen opinion posts. Sequence is squeezing the available room, and shrinking room is bad news for any public narrative built on vibes instead of verification. Pressure rarely arrives with fireworks. Pressure often arrives with timestamps, wording changes, and routine records that suddenly stop looking routine. That is why the smartest viewers are no longer asking only who shouted first. The sharper question is which record survives longest. A messy headline can fade. A documented pattern can stain careers, partnerships, endorsements, and public trust for years. Public confidence around Stefon Diggs now depends less on charisma and more on whether future filings flatten or reinforce Christopher Blake Griffith sequence. Every added exhibit turns the story away from speculation and closer to a measurable architecture of claims, responses, and consequences. Nobody inside the story should want extra noise. Noise gives emotion. Records give shape. Shape lasts longer than noise. If alignment keeps building, old defenses will look less like loyalty and more like footage from a moment when the paperwork had not spoken loudly enough yet. If alignment breaks, Christopher Blake Griffith will face the blowback that always comes when a record-heavy accusation outruns supportable proof. Watch the next filing, the next answer, the next amendment, and the next silence. Every one of those moments now carries more weight than a dozen opinion posts. Sequence is squeezing the available room, and shrinking room is bad news for any public narrative built on vibes instead of verification. Pressure rarely arrives with fireworks. Pressure often arrives with timestamps, wording changes, and routine records that suddenly stop looking routine. That is why the smartest viewers are no longer asking only who shouted first. The sharper question is which record survives longest. A messy headline can fade. A documented pattern can stain careers, partnerships, endorsements, and public trust for years. Public confidence around Stefon Diggs now depends less on charisma and more on whether future filings flatten or reinforce Christopher Blake Griffith sequence. Every added exhibit turns the story away from speculation and closer to a measurable architecture of claims, responses, and consequences. Nobody inside the story should want extra noise. Noise gives emotion. Records give shape. Shape lasts longer than noise. If alignment keeps building, old offenses will look less like loyalty and more like footage from a moment when the paperwork had not spoken loudly enough yet. If alignment breaks, Christopher Blake Griffith will face the blowback that always comes when a record-heavy accusation outruns supportable proof. Records remember. Deadlines expose weak stories. Filing dates change momentum. Precision beats posture. Documentation punishes improvisation. Convergence raises stakes. Silence acquires meaning under pressure. Sequence keeps score. Supporters feel the shift first. Paper trails outlive bravado. Measured filings outlast loud spins. The record keeps tightening. Context is becoming cur.